Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Understanding PT and OT Components of PDPM with Liz Barlow. At this time, Liz will begin the presentation. Liz, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, and welcome, everyone. It looks like we've got another really nice turnout for today's webinar. So thanks for joining me for another one of these PDPM, Prepare, Plan, and Perform webinars. Today we're really going to be drilling down and understanding more about the components for the PT and OT sections of payment for PDPM. So just in brief, the objectives today are we're going to briefly go through the PDPM components, understand the formula. There's a formula to determine PT and OT. We're going to talk a little bit about how CMS has defined the ICD-10 mapping and what that looks like. And we're also going to talk about a really important part of the CMI for PT and OT is the functional scoring. And so we're going to take a look at how CMS determines that. Before I really start digging into this, I do just want to say as a little bit of a disclaimer is, some of this certainly may be changing and updated. So always check the CMS website to see if there are any updates or changes. But everything that we're going to go through today is updated through today. So I always just want to say that because I know there is a lot more information from CMS that will continue to come. And this is, I always like to show this slide, and for those of you who will be joining me on multiple sessions, you're going to see this probably in every single presentation that we do, just because I think it always does really give us a nice visual on what PDPM looks like in comparison to RUGs. And, I always want to stress, and you'll hear me say this over and over as well, this is a payment change. It's not a skilled change. It's not a benefit policy manual change right now. There's just a change in how CMS is defined on how they're going to pay us. And if there are any other changes along the way, certainly we will update you. But right now it's all about payment and how they are going to pay us for those Part A skilled patients. So the visual on the left talks and represents more about what RUGs look like, right? It's very quantity-based. Most of the RUGs, more than 90%, are therapy RUGs. So the more rehab we get, typically the higher payment. And under PDPM, that's going to look much different. And again, these sessions are going to really drill down into more of what that looks like and how CMS is going to pay us. So as you can see on the right-hand side, there are 6 different components. 5 of those have case mix indices attached to those. PT and OT today, or certainly, again, what we're going to talk about, there is a non-case mix payment that doesn't change throughout. So the PT and OT components are determined exactly the same, which is why we have lumped those together. So again, this is really another nice visual for you on how each component is determined. And each of these components have, you can see a base rate and then a CMI in 5 of the 6 of them. Some of them have an adjustment factor. The PT and OT components do have an adjustment factor, and we will walk through that. And again, just a close-up of what this looks like. PT and OT both, again, they both have a base rate, and I'm going to show you what that is. And then the CMI, again, there's a formula and a description of how CMS has defined that. So we're going to walk through the steps of that, and then what does that adjustment factor look like as well. So I pulled this from the final rule that came out July 31st of last year, and this represents rural and urban rates, and your rate will not change. This is your base rate that you will be receiving, and again, depending on where you are in the country, and there are some other factors, that's going to be your base rate for the PT and the OT components. So for example, if you're an urban facility, the PT base rate is $59.33, and OT is $55.23. That's where this formula starts. Okay, so we've got a base rate. The case mix components for PT and OT, again, are the same. And step one is determining the primary reason for SNF care. We're going to go through that. And then functional status, which is based on section GG. Again, there is also a variable component that we'll talk about once we go through the other two steps. So step one is determining the primary reason for admission to the SNF. And that is going to come from the MDS, section I0020B. That will be a new section starting this fall. For those of you who have been following the PDPM regs and updates, they said up until about a month and a half ago that it was going to be under I-8000. That recently changed with some updates that CMS put on their website. So I0020B will be the new section with a question that says, what is primary reason for admission to the SNF? Based on what that code is, it is mapped. And CMS, and I'll show you in a minute, has some nice Excel spreadsheets that show you what category a code falls under. They're very large, but you can download them from their website right now. So as you can see, on the left-hand side are 10 clinical categories that they have made, that they have for PDPM, and I've listed those all out. They have further collapsed the categories for the PT and OT components specifically. So for example, if a patient or resident comes to us for Part A stay and they've got a cancer diagnosis and they are coming to us for some type of care as a result of a cancer diagnosis in the hospital, it would most likely fall under the medical management category. So again, CMS has a map based on an Excel spreadsheet with the codes, and it tells us what clinical category it goes to. So I'm going to show you an example, and I have pulled this from one of the spreadsheets that they share with us. The website that I have on here is the website for the PDPM information that CMS just released about a month and a half ago. I believe it was the beginning of December. At the bottom of the page, it says, there's a bullet that says ICD-10 clinical category crosswalks. There are several attachments that you can download. That is where I just did a snippet to show you guys what this looks like. So on the left-hand side is the diagnosis code. The middle section tells us what that diagnosis code means. And then on the very right-hand side, you can see it tells us what category that patient would fall under. So in this case, if a patient were to come to us at S24141D, which would be appropriate because D usually means a subsequent encounter, and a lot of therapy and healing occurs with a D code. If the patient came to us with that code, goes to acute neurologic, which then is crosswalked from a PT and OT perspective to non-orthopedic surgery and acute neurologic. So you can see where for PT and OT specifically, you've got a code that goes to a PDPM category. It further goes to a PT and OT category. In addition, there will be some new surgery sections on the MDS, again, that will be coming out October 1, the new MDS for October 1, that has updated sections for Section J, which is surgery. And I've included a snippet. They released the item sets on one of their websites, really, I think it was last week. And so we don't have detail as to what the MDS looks like yet, but I did want to show you all some of the new sections for this Section J surgery. So you can see, I know it's a little hard to read, but J2300, for example, is a new item that says knee replacement, partial or total. The question starts out saying, did the resident have a major surgical procedure during the prior inpatient hospital stay that requires active care during the SNF stay? So then there will be a list of choices. You can see the new item added in that snippet that you will check off as far as was there surgery in the prior hospital and is it currently requiring some active care in the SNF. You would check yes, and then you click off the appropriate surgery. Based on some determinants that CMS has not well defined yet, if there was a surgery, it could alter the clinical category that the patient would have fallen into originally. So let me show you what that means. And again, I'm active in an organization who had a call with CMS last week and asked some of these questions, and they said more detail is coming. So this is one of those areas that I'm going to talk about today, but just know that more information will be coming throughout, the next several months. So this code is a pathological fracture that you've got the description. It has a default clinical category of medical management, but it also says further down on the spreadsheet that this patient with this diagnosis may be eligible for one of the 2 orthopedic surgery categories. So again, we're not 100% sure what this looks like, but based on some of that section J that I just went through, it could alter the clinical category. So some of that, just so you know, is still unknown, but know that that section J is coming. Knowing the history of that, what has happened with that patient, and getting that accurate information on admission or prior to admission is incredibly important. So we've got the clinical category, step 1, we're done. Step 2 is based on functional score, which is GG. I know that all of us have been familiar with GG. It rolled out in 2016. A lot more components were added this year. We're all wrapping our brain, I think, still around some of those components. But there are 10 items that they are looking at specifically for this functional score. Now, I know you all are aware of this, but right now it's based on section G, and as you know, GG looks different and the scoring is very different. So it's a little bit of a shift for all of us to go from section G, which we have had for many, many years, to section GG. So let me show you what that looks like as well. Here is a graph of what items are going to impact the PT and OT component. And on the next slide, I'm going to go through how the scoring works. But here are the 10 components. You will see that the bed mobility and the transfer and the walking, actually they take an average score and you divide it by the number of items. If there's a decimal, for some reason when you divide, they say to round it to the nearest integer. If you have software, it will most likely determine that itself. But I just wanted to show you all that. So there is a score from 0 to 4, with 4 being more independent. So here's what that looks like. So if we scored a patient or resident a 5 or a 6 for eating, we're going to score them a 4. So with the components that I just showed you, the highest score that you can get, if a patient is completely independent based on what we're scoring, they would get a 24. And again, that's really inversely related to the section G that we're so used to right now. The top part of this includes walking, includes everything but walking. The bottom section just talks about if a patient or resident cannot walk, you would score it as 0. So they divided it up a little bit, but the scoring is essentially the same. They have clarified that if you use one of the non-applicable definitions, it's considered a 0. And if you, for some reason, leave it blank, they're going to count it as a 0 automatically. So there's your scoring tool. So we've got those 10 components. We've added them up, and we get a score from 0 to 24. Again, 0 being the most dependent and 24 being the most independent. And this is what it looks like. So we've talked about each of the clinical categories. There are 4. They further divided up the PT and OT functional score for each of these sections from 0 to 5, 6 to 9, 10 to 23, and then 24, which is the most independent. So what is interesting about this, and as we continue to read through this and learn, you will notice that there is no direct relationship between increased dependence and the increased payment. And I'm going to show you a really quick example for this. The highest PT CMI that you're looking at is a 1.92 for a major joint replacement or spinal surgery, and the PT and OT, the PT functional score is a 24, which is independent. So for those of you who love statistics, there is a lot of information in Acumen's report, which is the company that CMS contracted with to really work on this, which I could probably share with you if you really want to dig down. But they have rationale for the reasoning and the reasoning behind how they determine each of these CMIs. And the bottom line, kind of in a summary or in a nutshell, is that from a PT and OT perspective, they studied and said that the more independent the patient was, typically the more therapy the patient would be receiving. So that's not you can't follow that rule of thumb in every single case that you're looking at, but for the most part. So they made it a little bit more difficult, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you can't game the system. They were very cautious that people couldn't, that we providers couldn't look at this and go, oh, I'm going to score them, you know, a certain number just in order to try and get more dollars. Because the nursing categories for GG, which we'll have another webinar on that, look very different than this. So anyway, I wanted to point that out because I think it's a really important part of what we're looking at with PDPM. So clinical categories, functional score, and then you've got a CMI. That CMI, you remember if you go back to the graph that we showed at the beginning, you've got your base rate times your CMI, and I'm going to show you the formula again completed here in a minute. And that's going to give you your daily rate for PT and your daily rate for OT. I did want to just quickly go through a case study so we could talk through this for just a minute. And this is one that actually they gave an example in the final rule. So I know there's a lot of information on here. We're only going to focus on several of the areas that are listed. But I want us to think about it, and I've got several slides on this. Number one, this is resident A or patient A. What RUG would the patient or resident fall into, and what PT or OT category would that same patient fall into? Okay. So if we look at this, and I put the chart up so that we could, you know, talk through it. But I'm sure most of us are familiar enough with RUG to know that we're essentially just going to look at a couple of things. And we're going to assume this patient is skilled and has medical necessity, and that this is over a 7-day look back. But we've got 730 minutes with an ADL score of 9. And really right now, outside of any extensive services, those are the two things that we really need to know today for a RUG score, right? And so that would be an RUB based on the ADL score, which is G, and the therapy minutes. Well, under PDPM, it's going to look much different. So one of the things that we want to look at from a PDPM perspective is what clinical category, and they've already given that to us, which made it easy. And we've also got a functional score. So in looking at the chart, you can take a look and see what clinical category, and you crosswalk it to the functional score to show what case mix group that patient will fall under, and then the CMI. Okay, so again, clinical category is acute neurologic, PT and OT functional score is a 10. I'm showing with the arrows there that it is a TO, considered a TO, and it is a 1.55, oddly enough, for PT and OT, which is unusual. Most of the other CMIs are different depending on which discipline. Okay, so here it is on a daily rate. It's a TO. You've got your base rate, and I used a rural amount for this. 6763 times 1.55 is your $104.82 a day for PT. For OT, 6211 is your daily rate, your base rate. Your CMI, again, is 1.55, and that's your daily rate for OT. The patient is going to receive this every day, with the one exception I'm getting ready to talk about. So the other thing I want to stress, and I know we're all wrapping our brains around this because it's so different than RUGs, is that regardless of whether the patient receives therapy or how much, they're still going to get this rate. All of these components are added up and determined for that daily rate for that patient. And again, as you continue to join us month by month in all these sessions, it'll all start coming together. So that rate that we just talked about is going to be every day. They're all added up. PT and OT specifically, CMS is giving us an adjustment factor, and the chart on the adjustment factor is below. So what they're saying is we're going to pay you 100% of that daily rate times CMI for 20 days. On day 21 and every 7 days thereafter, it's going to drop 2% for your rate. Okay, and again, the chart's below. So you've got your base rate times your CMI times the adjustment factor that's listed. So on day 21, we multiply it times 0.98. On day 28, we multiply it times 0.96. And I did this for a PT example at the top, so you can see on day 21, we multiply it times 0.98. It's going to drop a couple of bucks, probably about every 7 days. That's what it seems to be. And again, we would also do that same thing for OT. The only other category that has an adjustment factor is non-therapy ancillary, which again, I'll do a different section on that at a different webinar, and it's actually a positive gain. Everybody's going to be happy about that one. So here it is in a nutshell again. Today we've talked about the PT and OT components. We've determined that the rate, the daily rate that we add up for this patient during their stay is based on clinical category and section GG scoring. Okay, so I'm going to start winding down. Preparation is key. You are going to hear me talk a lot about the same things probably over and over if you join me every month. But I do want to reiterate the importance of some of these things because, number one, you are joining this call now, which is step number one. And you know, be proud of yourself for trying to prepare, you know, 9 months out before this gets started. So you're doing the right thing by trying to get your hands on some learning. So that's awesome. Do as much as you can, do some self-reading, whatever it takes to really get a feel for what this looks like. You know, we've talked about coding, ICD-10 coding, and also MDS coding is just such a vital component. We've got to make sure we capture exactly what's going on with these folks in order to get reimbursed for the care we're providing. You know, right now it's important, but there are probably some sections that are a little more important than others. And really with PDPM, there are so many different areas of the MDS that could potentially impact coding, particularly from nursing and particularly from the non-therapy ancillary component that we'll go over later. It's just, again, it's vital. We are going to be doing an ICD-10 full-hour session next month. It's going to be just an ICD-10 basic coding for SNFs that we will be doing, so be on the lookout for that invitation. It's going to be longer than some of the other webinars that we're doing. We talked a little bit about GG today and the impact of that functional scoring. Start now, start looking at your processes. We need to make sure that we're capturing usual performance. Remember, usual isn't the best and it's not the worst, it's the usual. And discussions between all team members in that in order to code that appropriately, really important. Person-centered care, you know, I'll list that because that's first and foremost. I probably should move that to number one. I am excited as a nurse about PDPM because I do feel like it really helps us to focus on all of the patient's care needs and to learn how to look at those, care plan, talk about discharge planning even before they come in, and really set our sights back on that patient. And not that we've lost sight of it, but I do think that drugs changed our focus a little bit. So all of us getting together and having that collaborative discussion and collaborative talk and see what the patient wants, I think is just so important. And with that, I want to close with stay focused on the patient. At Rehab Care, we have these fabulous 6 core values. One of them, one of several, is stay focused on the patient. And I always say, you know, if we stay focused on the patient, everything else will fall into place. And so I'm going to end all of our sessions with this and say thank you for joining us. This will be recorded. I will be sending out a PDF with all of the slides. Give me a few days to get that out to you all. If you ever have any questions, I'm going to leave this up for just a minute. There are resources on here too, but my email address is on here, and it goes under elizabeth.barlow@rehabcare.com. So again, thanks for your time today. I'm very appreciative. You guys have a great day.